Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of FinServ Tech Oracles. I'm Johna Till-Johnson, here with my oracular colleague, Jerry Murphy, to share our thoughts on technology for financial services firms. Jerry, for this episode, you wanted to talk about the weight of regulatory oversight. Do you think it's going to crush competition and force further consolidation in the financial space?
Yes. Well,
okay, well, then we're done, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been seeing in the last 6 months is that there's just more and more regulatory oversight. Obviously, security issues seem to be just exploding, just been going from bad to worse in terms of the number of attacks that are happening places. In a reaction to that, you have more and more regulatory oversight where the SEC is now like, I'm serious. It's not just these rules, but we're going to really, really check on this stuff now. And it seems like they're getting serious in terms of specifically calling people out. At the same time, you continue to have consolidation happening because people just can't afford to manage all this on their own. I mean, we just saw recently, HPE announced that we're going to acquire Juniper. You have Microsoft and OpenAI, and who knows how beautiful those bedfellows are. Obviously, those bedfellows have been very, very sloppy and nasty here in the last couple months, but that doesn't mean those kind of issues aren't going away. It's just highlighting, the importance and visibility of these types of things. So, yeah, it's going to continue, and that makes it challenging for businesses because it makes it harder and harder to either pick the right horse. And as people try to want you to have an all-in-one solution, especially people like Microsoft. It's like if you bet wrong, it could potentially mess up a whole bunch of things in your environment. So it's happening more, and it's going to make things harder for people, I think.
Well, and it's always interesting that consolidation happens in periods post innovation. It's sort of, there's a surge of innovation, then there's a surge of consolidation, then there's a surge of innovation and a surge of consolidation, and so on. What do you see? How do you connect this tech industry consolidation with the impact on increased SEC compliance measures? Like, what's the connection there?
Well, I think as it gets, there's two ways. There's the vendor industry, and then there's the actual, financial services industry itself, right? So on the tech industry, more and more oversight on weighting them on what they're doing for their products makes it more expensive for them to certify that their products are working properly. At the same token, for financial services companies that are using this technology, all the oversight makes it harder and harder for them to comply. It costs them more money to prove that they're following all these rules. And then the smaller you are, the more expensive it is per customer to deal with that. Therefore, it just makes it tougher and tougher to do that. So it's for a lot of these financial service companies, the answer is it's just easier to sell my company to a bigger company because I just literally can't afford to compete with these things. On the vendor side, it makes it where it just makes it natural for somebody bigger and bigger. Instead of to spend the time to innovate, it just becomes easier and simple for them to say, oh, here's a new technology that's coming, here's a new threat. Let me find somebody who seems to have some
capability,
and just lump it into my thing. That's what they're doing in practice. What it does in reality is you'd think because somebody's got all these solutions that they're integrated, but there's a lot less integration with those things that are acquired than you might think. And if you take a second as a human being to think, well, something's got a database with a certain API, just because another company bought it doesn't mean that they inherently have things that are aligned from an API, operating system, patch standpoint. And the reality is, especially with the new ones, there's a lot less integration there than you would think exists. So it makes it tough to just because.
And it sounds like
it's all going to work right.
And it sounds like it puts an enormous amount of risk on individual technology practitioners, because if you decide to buy something that's not part of the big vendor, if it's non-Microsoft or non-HPE/Juniper, you're going to have to defend that decision much harder because the potential risk to your organization is much higher of guessing wrong. So it seems like that the general push would be towards safety, buying the big vendors, because even if they do have flaws, well, everybody else bought them too, so you're not uniquely going out on a limb doing something that put your organization at risk.
Well, it's interesting. There are two different types of risk, right? I mean, there's the risk of, I can't, the old adage, right? You can't go wrong buying IBM, which is what they said 20 or 30 years ago, right? It's like, you can't go wrong, or on the networking side, you can't go wrong buying Cisco because it's out there. Nobody's going to fault you for getting the thing that
exactly.
So there's the sort of, not the risk of choosing a vendor that everybody knows versus some young startup that nobody knows, but you're trading that risk for the risk of, maybe not as good customer service, not actually having a product that completely meets your business requirements, the risk of having things not integrate, or the fact that they're broken. And of course, if there is a virus or bug on that well-known thing, it's going to rifle through the whole industry, because if Microsoft has a flaw, way more people are going to get affected than if you have something not as many people know. So you're kind of trading one risk for another risk.
I hear that, but it sounds to me like, given one risk is not going to send you to jail. Like, oh gee, we have to work an extra 20 hours a week to do the integration. Sucks, but nobody's sending me to jail. The other risk is, oh, you chose this vendor that had this bug, that therefore you were being irresponsible and therefore you're going to jail. Well, heck, I'll take the 20 hours a week, not the jail time, please.
Right. And the other thing I would say about that from risk, and a thing that makes sense sometimes, especially if you're a smaller financial services company, it just makes a lot more sense to say, if there's a function that needs to be performed, as opposed to me building it myself, because I probably don't have the staff, the expertise to look through all of the nuances of the different details. Makes more sense to take some of those functions and really look at outsourcing them, right? Like like if you look at your SOC, right? If you're small enough, it doesn't make financial sense for you to necessarily build it yourself. And two, you don't necessarily have the expertise. So when it comes to, if I'm going to have somebody manage my security operations, outsourcing that to a third party, they're probably going to do it better. It's probably going to be cheaper, and there's probably going to be less risk as well. So there's some things that probably makes sense to look at outsourcing, and then kind of the monkeys on the service provider to make sure that they're doing the patch updates and they're doing all those things. And if there's a problem with it, it's more their problem than yours legally.
Well, actually, it's not, though, as I understand it. That's one of the things about the new SEC regulation is, if you knowingly are working with somebody that has problems, that risk then goes to you. So you're not able to say, hey, it's the service provider's problem, it's not my problem.
Well, I think one of the things
that was one of the big changes in the ruling last year.
Right, but one of the key things is now
knowing,
right?
Yes.
I mean, if you know about it, obviously, so, oh, we know I have this problem and I don't know about it. So I think one of the key things is, there's two issues there. One is, outsourcing where it financially makes sense and they have better expertise than I have. But in terms of the notifications, whatever you're doing, if you see any issue, whether it's a vendor issue, something that's out there noticed in the public, you find it yourself. When in doubt, you got to notify your management. You probably got to notify law enforcement. You probably have to report it to the SEC. When in doubt, I think what's going to happen is, as opposed to, I'm not sure, I'm not going to tell anybody, it's probably going to start shifting to, when I'm not sure, you better let somebody know.
Which I think would be a good thing. But my takeaway then from everything you've said is, consolidation is essentially making it safer to pick big vendors, as much as technically that's not really the right solution necessarily. But it's safer. Second, it also pushes outsourcing. And it seems to me that there's a big piece of don't ask, don't tell there, because if you know something is the case, then suddenly the monkey's on your back.
Right.
Whereas if you don't know it, if you didn't ask and don't know, then therefore you're immune. So it does seem like this. So there's a very negative series of unforeseen consequences from all this regulation. But definitely something to keep an eye on. And I would highlight the very last thing that you said, which is, if you see something going on, if you see something, say something. Don't risk keeping it in-house, handling it yourself at this point, if you're a FinServ Tech person. And with that, that wraps it up. That's it till next week. Thank you for watching or listening. Please go ahead and click the link beside the webinar, and you can subscribe to the entire series online. And tune in next week at 0900 for the next episode of FinServ Tech Oracles, right before the markets open on Tuesdays.
See you later.